Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praise be Jesus Christ. And welcome to this live-streamed broadcast of Pope Francis's general audience of Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. My name is Christopher Wells, and I'll be providing the English language commentary for this morning's audience. Pope Francis is expected to continue his new catechetical series on discernment, reflecting today on the elements of discernment, beginning with knowing oneself. The Holy Father will begin the audience, as usual, with the sign of the cross and the liturgical greeting, after which we'll hear the scriptural passage chosen for the day's reflection. Today's passage is taken from the Old Testament book of Sirach, chapter 17, verse 1 and verses 6 and 7. After the reading is proclaimed in multiple languages, Pope Francis will give his catechesis in Italian. We'll translate that into English for you. After the catechesis, the Pope greets pilgrims and visitors in various major languages. For each language, a speaker gives a greeting to the Holy Father and then a summary of the catechesis in their own language. Pope Francis then says a few words of greeting in Italian, which are then translated into the various languages. We'll offer a translation of the greetings, although not the summaries, as the summaries are essentially the same for each of the various languages. The general audience concludes with the recitation in Latin of the Our Father, followed by the Pope's Apostolic Blessing, which is extended not only to those present, but to everyone following the audience live. And now we see the Holy Father in the Pope Mobiliette, driving up the platform in front of St. Peter's Basilica. For those watching on television, you can see the Holy Father's throne is set up so that he can be seen throughout the square. On either side, there are groups of people, including the bishops and cardinals, present for the audience. Among those present for the various audiences each week, there's usually a special section set aside for recently married couples. Another wonderful opportunity for people at significant moments of their lives to see up close our Holy Father. And they come dressed in their wedding attire. It's very easy to request from the papal household tickets for the audience if you happen to be in Rome. And if you have been married in the last couple of months, they are happy to provide tickets for the special section for newlyweds. Those of you listening in on the radio, you hear the round of applause as the Holy Father reaches his throne. And he will begin now with the sign of the cross and the liturgical greeting. Peace be with you.
Il Santo Padre dà ora inizio all'udienza generale, introducendola con il segno della croce e il saluto liturgico. Disponiamoci ad accogliere la sua parola e a ricevere la sua benedizione.
Nel nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo. La pace sia con voi.
And now we'll hear the Scriptural passage chosen for today's audience in the various major languages, beginning with Italian.
Il Signore creò l'uomo dalla terra e ad essa di nuovo lo fece tornare. Discernimento, lingua, occhi, orecchi e cuore diede loro per pensare. Li riempì di scienza e di intelligenza e mostrò loro sia il bene che il male. È parola di Dio.
A reading from the book of Sirach. The Lord created human beings out of earth and makes them return to it again. Discretion and tongue, and eyes, ears, and a mind for thinking he gave them. He filled them with knowledge and understanding and showed them good and evil. The word of the Lord.
Now the words of our Holy Father.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buongiorno.
Dear brothers and sisters, good morning. We continue to deal with the theme of discernment. Last time we considered prayer as an indispensable element, and prayer understood as familiarity and competence with God as its indispensable element, not like repeating words like a parrot. This is what we saw in our last catechesis. Today, I'd like, in a somewhat complementary manner, to emphasize that good discernment also requires knowledge of self, knowing yourself. And this is not easy. Indeed, it involves our human faculties, memory, intellect, will, affections. Often we do not know how to discern because we do not know ourselves well enough. And so we do not know what we really want. And we've heard many times that people don't know what they really want. This may be a little bit extreme, but it happens to some degree in each one of us. Underlying spiritual doubts and vocational crises is not infrequently an insufficient dialogue between religious life and our human, cognitive, and affective dimensions. A writer on spirituality noted how many difficulties on the theme of discernment are indicative of problems of another kind, which must be recognized and explored. This author writes, I have come to the conviction that the greatest obstacle to true discernment and to real growth in prayer is not the intangible nature of God, but the fact that we do not know ourselves sufficiently and do not even want to know ourselves as we really are. Almost all of us hide behind a mask, not only in front of others, but also when we look in a mirror.
Abbiamo la tentazione di essere mascherati anche davanti a noi stessi.
We have a tendency to wear a mask even in front of ourselves. Forgetfulness of God's presence in our life goes hand in hand with ignorance of ourselves.
sulle caratteristiche
our personality traits, and our deepest desires.
più profondi. Conoscere se stessi non è difficile.
Knowing oneself is not difficult, but it is laborious.
Paziente lavoro
It implies patient soul searching.
chiede la capacità di
It requires the capacity to stop, to turn off the autopilot, to acquire awareness of our way of acting, of the feelings that dwell within us, of the recurring thoughts that condition us, often unconsciously. It also requires that we distinguish between emotions and spiritual faculties. I feel is not the same as I am convinced. I feel like it's not the same as I want. Thus we come to recognize that the view we have of ourselves and of reality is at times somewhat distorted. To realize this is a grace. Indeed, very often it can happen that erroneous convictions about reality based on past experiences strongly influence us, limiting our freedom to strive for what really matters in our lives. Living in the age of information technology, we know how important it is to know the password in order to get into the programs where the most personal and valuable information is stored. Spiritual life, too, has its passwords. There are words that touch the heart because they refer to what we are most sensitive to. The tempter knows these passwords well, and it is important that we know them too, so as not to find ourselves where we do not want to be. Temptation does not necessarily suggest bad things, but often disordered things presented with excessive importance. In this way, it hypnotizes us with the attraction that these things stir up in us, things that are beautiful but illusory, that cannot deliver what they promise, leaving us in the end with a sense of emptiness and sadness. This sense at times that we have gone along a path that is not right, and we end up disoriented. They can be degrees, careers, relationships, all things that are in themselves praiseworthy, but towards which, if we are not free, we risk harboring unrealistic expectations, such as confirmation of our own worth. You, for example, when you think about the studies that you're doing, you can think about promoting yourself. From this misunderstanding often comes the greatest suffering, because none of those things can be the guarantee of our dignity. That's why, dear brothers and sisters, it's important to know oneself, to know the passwords of our heart, what we are most sensitive to, in order to protect ourselves from those who present themselves with persuasive words to manipulate us, but also to recognize what is truly important for us, distinguishing it from current fads or flashy, superficial slogans. Oftentimes, you could say,
ci tocca il cuore, ci fa andare di quella parte senza libertà, no? State attenti a quello. Sono libero o mi lascio andare dei sentimenti del momento o delle provocazioni?
The Holy Father says, beware of things that are trying to manipulate you.
Ma non parlo dell'esame
An
di
aid in
coscienza
this
che ci
is
presentiamo
an examination of
alla
conscience.
confessione. No, questo
This
è
is not like the examination you do before confession.
no. Esame di coscienza generale della giornata.
This is more of a general reflection on the day. What happened
Nel mio cuore questa giornata.
in my heart today, on this day?
Sono passate tante cose, quali? Perché?
What happened throughout the day? Why did it happen?
Fare l'esame di coscienza.
Make
cioè
this
la
exam
buona
of conscience.
abitudine a
It's a good
rileggere con
habit
calma quello che
to
è accaduto
reflect
nella
at the end of the
giornata,
day on
imparando a notare
what happened during the
nelle
day.
valutazioni e nelle scelte ciò a cui diamo più importanza, cosa cerchiamo e perché, e cosa alla
An
fine
aid in this
abbiamo
examination of conscience, that is the good habit of calmly reading what happens in our day,
che cosa sa
learning to note in our evaluations and choices what we give most importance to, what we're looking for and why, and what we eventually find. Above all, learning to recognize what satiates the heart, for only the Lord can give us confirmation of what we are worth. He tells us this every day from the cross. He died for us to show us how precious we are in His eyes. There is no obstacle or failure that can prevent His tender embrace.
l'esame di coscienza
The examination of conscience is good for everyone.
il nostro cuore non è una strada che passa di tutto e noi non sappiamo. No, vedere cosa è passato oggi, cosa è successo,
We have to see what's happening in our hearts.
cosa mi ha fatto triste, cosa mi ha fatto
What's made me happy or sad?
è stata brutta e ho fatto del male.
What's bad or good that passed through our hearts in the day?
Delle attrazioni nel mio cuore durante la giornata. Non dimenticatevi, l'altro giorno abbiamo parlato della preghiera, oggi parliamo della conoscenza di se stessi. La preghiera e la conoscenza di se
Prayer and self-knowledge
stessi di crescere
enable us to grow in freedom.
questo è per crescere nella libertà. Sono elementi basici.
They are basic elements of Christian existence
elementi
and precious elements
per trovare il proprio
for finding one's place in life.
Grazie.
Thank you. Our Holy Father's reflection for today on discernment. And now we'll hear the exchange of greetings and summary in English.
Most Holy Father, the English-speaking pilgrims and visitors wish to express to you their sentiments of deep respect and esteem, and to assure you of their prayers for your ministry as the successor of Peter. At the end of the audience, we will sing together the Our Father in Latin. His Holiness will then impart his apostolic blessing, which he extends in a particular way to the members of your families at home. He also intends to bless any religious articles you may have brought for this purpose, and in a special way, his blessing goes to your children, the elderly, and those who are sick. The following is a summary of the Holy Father's catechesis at the beginning of the audience. Dear brothers and sisters, in our continuing catechesis on spiritual discernment, we have considered the essential importance of growth in prayer. Today, we consider, as a necessary complement to prayer, our need to grow in self-knowledge. Coming to know ourselves is not easy. It requires honesty and a patient descent into the depths of our heart. Self-knowledge is itself a fruit of God's grace, whereby we are led to abandon our illusions, to understand who we really are, and to embrace the things that can bring us genuine happiness. In effect, we learn the passwords that open the portal to our deepest self and the paths that can lead us to lasting spiritual joy and fulfillment in obedience to God's gracious will. A great help to such prayerful insight into ourselves, and thus to authentic discernment, is the traditional practice of the nightly examination of conscience. Through daily prayer and self-knowledge, may we more readily discern the Lord's plan for our lives and come to appreciate more fully our dignity and freedom as beloved children of our Heavenly Father. The Holy Father will now greet us in Italian.
Do il benvenuto a tutti I pellegrini di lingua inglese presenti nell'odierna udienza, specialmente quelli provenienti da Scozia.
I greet the English-speaking pilgrims taking part in today's audience, especially those from England, Scotland, Norway, Sweden, Australia, India, Vietnam, and the United States of America. I offer a special greeting to the new seminarians from the Pontifical Beta College and to the Catholic Association of Preachers from England. Upon all of you, I invoke the joy and peace of Christ our Lord. God bless you.
The Holy Father will now lead us in the prayer of the Our Father, followed by his apostolic benediction.
Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentatione, sed libera nos a malo.
Dominum vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo.
sit nomen Domini benedictum, aiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater, et Filius, et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen.
And the audience concludes with the Holy Father's apostolic blessing, extended, as we mentioned, not only to those present here at the audience, but also to everyone listening in live to the blessing. And with the apostolic blessing, today's general audience draws to a close. On behalf of Vatican Radio, I'd like to thank all of our partners who help make these live broadcasts available throughout the world.